students, a very warm welcome to this particular class on clinical based physiology questions. I'm Dr. Pinaki and we will be discussing few of the clinical oriented questions in which physiology is a base of interpretation. With that, let's begin with the discussion. So, the first question that we have put over here is a 25-year-old male after a road traffic accident presents to the casualty with waxing waning kind of a breathing pattern. What could be the cause? The options are Cheyne-Stokes breathing, Biot's breathing, Kussmaul's breathing, and tachypnea. Now, this particular kind of a breathing, that is a waxing and the waning kind of a breathing, is classically seen in Cheyne-Stokes breathing. So, this increase in the respiratory rate and the reduction where there is hyperventilation followed by a period of apnea, which is transient, followed by again the phase of hyperventilation, is classical seen in Cheyne-Stokes breathing. It is a kind of a periodic breathing where the alterations in the blood partial pressure of carbon dioxide and the partial pressure of oxygen takes time to reach to the brain, or the brain is unable to interpret the changes in the partial pressures of oxygen and carbon dioxide. In both these conditions, the variations that need to happen with the respiration with respect to the changes in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide and oxygen takes a little time, and hence the person goes into a phase of hyperventilation followed by apnea due to inability to interpret. This particular kind of breathing is seen in congestive cardiac failure and brain injury. In congestive cardiac failure, because the heart is finding it difficult to pump the blood, the changes in the partial pressures of oxygen and carbon dioxide finds it difficult to interpret at the level of brain, and that's why the person goes on into the phase of hyperventilation, and by the time the blood is which is deficient in partial pressure of carbon dioxide reaches the brain, it goes on hyperventilating, and then as soon as the blood which is deficient in carbon dioxide reaches the brain, the person has gone into multiple cycles of hyperventilation, and then the person goes into the phase of apnea. So this continuous process goes on happening, and it is also seen in brain injury where the brain is unable to understand the changes in the partial pressure and of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and it becomes difficult for the brain to interpret and analyze the situation. Now, there are other types of respirations which are also given. They have written Biot's breathing. Now, Biot's breathing is an abnormal breathing which is classically seen in meningitis, where there are bout of increased respiration followed by a phase of apnea. So there's a single bout of hyperventilation or respiration followed by apnea, which is classically seen in meningitis. Another type of periodic breathing is Kussmaul's breathing, which is classically seen in diabetic ketoacidosis, where there is rapid shallow breathing. The reason for diabetic ketoacidosis showing a rapid shallow breathing is there's increase in H plus ions in diabetic ketoacidosis, and H plus ions are a direct stimulator to the central chemoreceptors in the brain stem where we have the respiratory centers, and that causes the increase in the activity. Now here only quickly I'll tell you all the centers which are present in the medulla and the pons. So if I have to write down in pons and in medulla, we have pre-Botzinger's complex, which is acting as a pacemaker, which will send impulses to the dorsal respiratory group of neurons, which initiates the respiration by sending ramp signal to the cervical cranial nerves of C3, C4 and C5, which innervates the diaphragm via phrenic nerve. There's a feedback mechanism from the diaphragm to the DRG via vagus nerve. In addition, there is a presence of ventral respiratory group of neurons which generally remain quiescent in the entire phase of respiration. They start working only when there are increase in the efforts required. So only when there is increased effort in the respiration. Then we have centers in the pons and the upper pons. We have pneumotaxic center and the lower pons we have apneustic center. Pneumotaxic center acts by inhibiting the apneustic center, and apneustic center has stimulatory action on the dorsal respiratory group of neurons. The pneumotaxic center will increase the respiratory rate by increasing the rate of switch off of ramp signals. So this is in short the neural control and the various periodic breathings which are seen. So here the correct answer would be Cheyne-Stokes breathing. Coming to the next question. A 60-year-old male complains of breathing on climbing stairs. On examination, the cardiovascular system is normal. The respiratory flow rate curve is as given below. What could be the probable cause? The options given are obstructive airway disease, parenchymal restrictive airway diseases, a normal report, and the vocal cord obstruction. Now, this is the graph of the patient and this is for a normal person. Now, if you see, the graph of the patient is actually a mirror image of the normal curve. So, it is actually a mirror image. But if you see, all the values are reduced. In fact, the total lung capacity, the vital capacity, residual volume, all the parameters are reduced. So, if you see this graph, there is a reduction in the capacities at all the levels, including the total lung capacity, the residual volume, the vital capacity. This particular graph generally is seen in restrictive kind of a lung disorder. Restrictive lung disorders. Now let's discuss a little bit about the different types of the lung diseases and their interpretation on the flow volume curve. So this is basically a flow volume curve. And let's discuss the lung diseases. So basically we have two main classifications. We have obstructive lung diseases and restrictive lung diseases. In obstructive lung diseases, generally we have something called as COPD, asthma, emphysema, and in restrictive lung diseases, generally they are classified into parenchymal, that is within the lung, and extra parenchymal. In parenchymal, the conditions could be fibrosis, which could be because of interstitial fibrosis, radiation fibrosis. It could be because of the tumor within the lung. It could be interstitial lung diseases. Which could be because of the occupational hazard, pneumoconiosis, asbestosis, so on and so forth. And an extrapyramidal restrictive kind of a lung disease, the problem could be at the level of neuromuscular junction, which is myasthenia gravis, or there could be a problem with the vertebral column, which is in the form of kyphosis, scoliosis, and lumbar lordosis. In myasthenia gravis, along with that, we can have Guillain-Barré syndrome. The problem with obstructive lung disease is the air is trapped and it is difficult to release the air. So there's increase in the residual volume, increase in the expiratory reserve volume, increase in the functional residual volume. And if you see the entire graph, the graph is slightly reduced. The graph is reduced and the expiratory flow rate shows this presence of kinking. This is called as kinking, which is classical and obstructive lung disease. This is because of the dynamic compression of the airways as the air is trying to come out of the constricted bronchioles. On the other hand, if you compare this graph with the normal graph is appearing like this, where the inspiratory curve is starting from 2 liters, extending till 6 liters. So this is 0. This entire thing is a total lung volume. And the expiratory curves are also smooth with no kinking. On the other hand, the respiratory restrictive lung diseases will show exact mirror image, but the volumes will be reduced because in restriction, the entire volume is reduced. So this is a characteristic feature where the total lung capacity is reduced, which will be depicted in all the values, including residual volume, expiratory reserve volume, functional residual capacity, etc. And hence, this particular graph is of parenchymal restrictive lung disease. In vocal cord diseases, the appearance is somewhat like this. So, in vocal cord obstruction, the appearance of the graph is somewhat hexagonal and it is mainly representing the upper respiratory tract obstruction. So the correct answer over here is parenchymal restrictive lung disease. Let's go to the next question. This is an ECG record of a 25-year-old male which shows K complexes and sleep spindles on EEG recording. What could be the stage of the sleep? Here if you see, the sleep is divided into NREM and REM stage. In NREM, there are stage 1, 2, 3 and 4. Each stage has specific EEG recordings. For example, stage 1 has low voltage theta waves. Stage 2, which is also called as light sleep, shows presence of delta waves and also sleep spindles and K complexes. Stage 3, where there is medium sleep characterized by delta waves, and here also the person will have episodes of sleepwalking, sleep talking, tremors or bedwetting. And in stage 4, which is deep sleep, the delta waves are very prominent. On the REM side, it is also called as paradoxical sleep, because EEG recording is showing beta waves, which is basically a characteristic of alert, awake state. This is also characterized by pontogeniculo-occipital spikes, which are classically seen in REM because generally it is assumed that the dreams appear in REM stage. So, considering this particular characteristic feature, the K complexes and the sleep spindles are seen in which stage? They are seen in stage 2, which is seen over here. Another important thing that I would like to tell you here is these sleep spindles and K complexes are mainly because of hyperpolarizing GABA thalamic reticular neurons, which inhibits the thalamocortical projections. So basically, these sleep spindles and K complexes are hyperpolarizing records which gets depicted on the EEG. Let's go to the next question. What is the transport system in curve A? So this is a curve A, and the options which are given over here are movement of carbon dioxide across the plasma membrane, movement of oxygen across the lipid bilayer, sodium flux through the open nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, and the glucose transport in the skeletal muscle. So the curve A and the other curve. So let's discuss this particular curve first. So the curve is saying there's a direct straight line and there's another line which is showing a plateau. So the question is about this. So the straight line which is depicting the movement of substances down the concentration gradient and the transport. Now if you see in this kind of a curve where it's a straight line where the transport of the substance across the membrane is directly proportional to the concentration gradient. More the concentration gradient, more is the transport, is a classical example of simple diffusion. So, simple diffusion where substances are moving from high concentration to low concentration, no ATP is required and no carrier protein. This is a characteristic feature and it follows the Fick's principle of diffusion. Which states that the transport across the membrane is directly proportional to concentration gradient, the diffusion coefficient, and the solubility, and inversely proportional to the thickness of the membrane and the molecular weight, square root of the molecular weight of the gas. Now, depending on this, the examples of simple diffusion is oxygen and carbon dioxide transport across the lipid bilayer. And now coming to another type of diffusion, which is facilitated diffusion. Now in facilitated diffusion, here also the substance is moving from high concentration to low concentration. No ATP is required, but the limitation for the movement is presence of carrier proteins. So in spite of having a concentration gradient, if all the carrier proteins are saturated, the transport of the substance will follow a saturation kinetics. That saturation kinetics is called as Mitchell-Mentes law of saturation kinetics. And hence, there is a plateau in the transport. Examples are GLUT transporters. And now, let's discuss the options. So, the options given are movement of carbon dioxide across the plasma membrane, Movement of oxygen across the lipid bilayer. I have already told you the gases generally follow the simple diffusion. So the first two options are options of simple diffusion. Sodium flux through the open nicotinic channel. Now what is this particular kind of a transport? Now we have something called as ligand gated channels. Where a neurotransmitter combines with the receptor and it results into opening of a channel which causes movement of either cations and anions. Most of the times it is cations like sodium and calcium from extracellular fluid to the intracellular compartment, mainly because sodium is more in the ECF, and because of that, every time the channel opens up, because of the concentration gradient, sodium moves from the extracellular compartment to the intracellular compartment. Now, these kind of channels are called as ligand gated channels, and they do not follow this kind of a transport mechanism or this kind of a graph representation. The last option is glucose transport through the skeletal muscle. I've already told you the facilitated diffusion is an example that is followed by the GLUT transporters. The GLUT4 transporter, which is insulin mediated glucose transport, insulin mediated glucose transport, which is seen in muscles, especially skeletal and cardiac muscle, along with adipose tissue, is an example of facilitated diffusion. And facilitated diffusion is depicted in graph A, whereas the other graph is a graph for simple diffusion. So graph A depicts glucose transport in the skeletal muscle. So that brings me to the next question for discussion. A 60-year-old diabetes mellitus patient undergoes urine analysis. The report shows microalbuminuria. What is the site of reabsorption of the proteins? The options are podocytes, proximal convoluted tubule, distal convoluted tubule, and collecting tubule. Now let's understand what are the different parts of the nephron and the reabsorption secretion kinetics in different parts of the nephron. So I'll draw a very simple diagram. I'll actually draw a line diagram for the representation. So this is a PCT. Almost 65 to 80% of sodium, glucose, amino acid, chloride, bicarbonate, some amount of urea, and water is getting reabsorbed from the PCT. This results into isoosmotic fluid in the PCT. So the osmolarity of the fluid in the PCT is 300. Then comes to the later part of the tubule, which is a descending limb, where 20% of water is getting reabsorbed by virtue of aquaporin 1, which do not require ADH. Now here, because the water is getting reabsorbed, it increases the filtrate osmolarity. The filtrate osmolarity increases to 600 milliosmoles. Then the filtrate moves into the ascending limb, which is a thin ascending limb, impermeable to water. So the osmolarity is reducing to almost 400 milliosmoles. Next comes the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle. Here almost 25% of sodium, chloride, potassium, calcium and magnesium are getting reabsorbed by virtue of sodium 2 chloride potassium channels. Then we have the early distal tubule, where some amount of reabsorption is happening. Almost 5 to 10% of sodium and chloride are getting reabsorbed. Then we have the distal tubule, where we have the principal cells, which causes reabsorption of sodium and excretion of potassium. Here we also have receptors for aldosterone and ADH. We also have what is called as intercalated cells, which are important for the acid-base balance. And then we have the later part of the nephron, which is a medullary collecting duct, where remaining 5 to 10% of solutes are getting reabsorbed, which includes sodium, potassium, and urea. So in the principal cells, sodium is getting reabsorbed, and it is roughly around 10%. Now, the question is, the report shows microalbuminuria. What is the site of reabsorption of protein? So maximum amount of proteins is getting reabsorbed in the proximal convoluted tubule, and hence the correct answer over here is proximal convoluted tubule. Now here I would just like to add one more point. The various diseases are related to the different parts of the nephron. For example, we have Fanconi syndrome, which is related to the proximal convoluted tubule. Then we have Bartter syndrome, which is related to the thick ascending limb of the loop of Henle. Then coming to the DCT, we have the Kittelman syndrome over here. And later in the collecting tubule, the disease which is related to this part is Liddle's syndrome. Maximum amount of proteins, sodium, glucose, amino acids are getting reabsorbed in the proximal convoluted tubule.